Hello everyone, so I made a video recently talking about casual shooters and why I think casual shooters are sort of dying out nowadays. And for the first time in my YouTube career, I had someone react to one of my videos. Now, the reaction was fine. I don't really want to talk about the reaction itself all that much, but this person's reaction made me realize there were some kind of holes in my explanation. I am still sort of a small YouTuber and I haven't really been doing this for too long, so it made me realize that there were some things that I left out. The main one being the definition of what a casual shooter actually is.
I wish he would have defined early on what made a casual shooter. All he said is like bringing back like Modern Warfare 2 and things like that. So I don't know. I'm torn on this one.
See, my audience is mostly Battlefield players. Battlefield players are definitely a casual audience. Battlefield is a casual game. A lot of my audience is kind of on the same page as me and knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say casual shooter. But I don't think most people really know what that actually means. One comment that I see a lot, especially when talking about this topic, is the player base of a video game defining whether or not it means it's a casual shooter. And at least for me, I don't think the player base has anything at all to do with a shooter being casual. What makes a casual shooter is the overall design of the game. Now, I do touch on this a little bit in the previous video that I was talking about, so maybe it's a little better to go back and watch that video, but if not, I'll explain here. Casual shooters are usually very simple in nature. The design of the game, the movement, the actual handling of the weapons themselves, the maps, and then the overall gameplay itself, again, usually very simple. Also, when a shooter is very simple, the skill gap tends to be very small. The distance between a good player and a new player is usually not very much. That's why games that are considered casual shooters don't tend to have skill-based matchmaking, because it doesn't really matter all that much in the end. I mentioned in that video that I play Battlefield 4 a lot still to this day, and I think Battlefield 4 is probably the best example of a casual shooter. Now, Battlefield 4 actually has a relatively high skill gap when it comes to the movement, but there are also a lot of things in the game that helps out new players and makes it relatively easy to get a good score. There is obviously no skill-based matchmaking in Battlefield 4, but you still see relatively new players have a pretty decent score, and you don't really see a lot of these like 1 to 30 score lines that you see in other FPS games. Like if you're playing Counter-Strike and you put a global elite player up against a silver, the silver would almost never kill a global elite player. But in a game like Battlefield 4, the best players in the world can still die to a new player because of how the maps are designed, because of the equipment of the game, everything like that. A lot of people also thought, because I was talking about a lot of older shooters, that this was more of just a nostalgia for the old games like Modern Warfare 2, Battlefield 4. Yes, they are relatively old. This has really nothing to do with nostalgia, and the best example of that I can give is Delta Force. It's a new game that's coming out. There's actually a playtest going on at the moment of me recording this video, and Delta Force is the perfect example of a new, modern, but casual shooter game. At least the Havoc Warfare portion of it. I know there is an extraction shooter portion. I don't really play that. I more play the Battlefield mode. The Battlefield mode, there's not a lot of very complicated movement mechanics. There's a lot of different weapons in the game that have a lot of different value. There is a lot of ways for the casual player to be useful in this game, and its overall design is indicative of a casual shooter. And as of right now, as me recording this video, I think there's like 40,000 people playing it. So that kind of more emboldens my point from the previous video that I think people still really want this style of game. The person that reacted to my video mentioned that he doesn't really think that a game like Battlefield 4, if it were released today, would be as popular, or Modern Warfare 2 were released today, it would be as popular.
If Call of Duty came out and you could only use one attachment on a weapon and the game was more simplified, maybe people would like it for like a week and then people would get bored of it.
But I really do disagree. There is a pretty big audience for it, and I see in my comment section all the time of people asking for a game like this. This is why people like Jack Frag, for example, still get a lot of views, because he plays a lot of these older Battlefield games, and his audience is mostly a casual audience for these kinds of games. People are very hungry for these games. It's just they're not being produced really anymore. I think one of the issues, which is actually going to be probably a main point of this video, is how good people have gotten at FPS games now. The skill gap in FPS games has grown tremendously from how it was 10 to 15 years ago. So I think it's relatively difficult for a player that's really good at FPS games to actually understand the mindset of a casual player. But one thing that does confuse me is that a lot of actual casual players that play some relatively casual games like the newer Battlefields or what I mentioned in the video, Warzone, they think these games aren't casual because of the player base. I don't really quite understand that. Just because there are sweaty people that play these games, that doesn't necessarily make the game not casual. A lot of the older casual games when I was younger, I wasn't very good. I mentioned this in the previous video. I had like a 0.6, 0.7 KD, something like that. I was pretty terrible at these games, and there are people that were a lot better than me. But I think the mindset has changed quite a lot. A lot of these older players or just casual players, for some reason, I think fear the idea of getting good at a game. For example, I made a video about BattleBit pretty recently where I was talking about why the game failed, and there was a couple comments about people saying that they just stopped playing because of how sweaty it got, which I do not understand. A lot of these people that played BattleBit are fans of Battlefield 4 and went back to Battlefield 4, but have you seen how some people play Battlefield 4? I know you have, because these people comment all the time in game chat calling people bunny rabbits for jumping around and tryharding all the time. People know that tryhards play these games, but continue to play them anyways. I'm not really sure when it comes to games like BattleBit, which by definition, by design, is a casual shooter. People complain about these sweaty players and then stop playing it. This might be because of how long these people have played these games like Battlefield 4. They think they're not good at the game, but they have a lot of knowledge about the game. And they know how to play it very well. So when they play one of these newer games and they see someone that's very good and has a very good mechanical skill, they don't really know how to counter them. When there are ways to counter these people, even if you aren't mechanically skilled, there are ways to outplay people without being mechanically skilled or sweaty. Now, in BattleBit, there aren't nearly as many ways to do this. In games like Battlefield 4, these tend to be camping strategies, but nonetheless, there are good ways of countering good players. Things like vehicles, UCAVs, mortars. There's all kinds of equipment in the game that can help out a casual player to outsmart and outplay a sweaty try-hard player. There are still ways to do this in games like BattleBit. It's just that these people haven't been playing these games all their lives, so they don't know all these ways to do these things. And that's where a lot of attempts at making a casual shooter kind of go wrong. Like, they make things a little too simple, like BattleBit, or they simply just focus on the wrong things, or have the skill gap be too big in certain places. I think XDefiant is a good example of a game that could have been a very casual game, but ended up not being one. This is mostly because of the movement in the game, and also I think it has a very high time to kill, which really rewards people with very good tracking. New players that aren't very good mechanically aren't going to be very good at tracking, obviously. This is further exacerbated by the movement. It's hard to track somebody when they're very good at movement.
Hit me. You cannot.
So this increases the skill gap way more than a casual shooter normally would. Another example of a casual shooter that actually kind of flew under the radar a little bit because of how poorly it was developed was a game called World War III. I know, kind of a dumb name, but it was supposed to be a game that actually rivaled Battlefield, and in my opinion, it was actually very good. They did a pretty good job developing it, but they just kind of failed on the server side of the game. It had very bad connection. They had server capacity of like 5,000 people or something. So when they launched the game, people tried to get in, crashed the servers, and then no one ever really gave it a chance ever again. You can still play it, but there's almost nobody playing it at this point. But World War III was a very good example of a casual shooter. The maps were designed to be very large, and there's a lot of different ways to flank people and a lot of ways to outplay people to where mechanics weren't as much of an issue. There was almost no movement mechanics at all whatsoever. It was just very simple, straightforward. You couldn't jump spam or anything like that. There was no air strafing, but it had really cool weapon mechanics. The weapons were really fun to build. They were relatively realistic and they were fun to use. They felt nice to use. This is another example of a good casual shooter, just poorly executed, that's all. I also saw some comments and kind of got the vibe from the person reacting to my video that I was saying that there shouldn't be competitive shooters or something like that, or that like they should start making casual shooters instead of competitive shooters. That is not at all what I was saying. I even say it in the video. There can be both. It doesn't necessarily have to be both in the same game either.
So, and then it's funny because he's talking about this, like ranked mode needs to be a thing at launch for every game.
What?
I never really said anything like this, so I'm not really sure where we got this idea from.
So then we're just making the normal modes casual and then the other modes competitive?
A game doesn't have to be competitive and casual at the same time. I'm saying that there can be competitive shooters and casual shooters living in harmony amongst each other every single day like you and I. I tend to see this reaction from both sides, competitive competitive players and casual players, when something releases that goes against the interest of whatever you're interested in, casual players will often complain when a very competitive shooter is released and saying, why would I ever want to play this? This is dumb. Or when a very casual game is released, competitive players saying this game is for noobs and it's stupid. There can be both at the same time. We don't have to fight over this all the time. It's a very dumb argument to think that because one game releases that there can't be the other. There can be both at the same time. So if you're a very competitive FPS player and you don't really know what I'm talking about, go download Delta Force and go play the Battlefield mode, and you'll pretty much know what I'm talking about immediately. You can also go read the comments on all the social media posts that these people are making and realize just how much hunger there is for a game like this. The reason why you don't really see a lot of casual fans anymore is because there aren't a lot of casual games anymore. I said it in the last video, if you build it, they will come. If you make a casual shooter, casual players will play them. They've been waiting for a very, very long time for a good casual FPS game. But that's really all I wanted to talk about in the video. If you're still confused by anything or have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I will be answering questions in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and sub. It helps me out quite a lot. And I'll see you guys in the next video.